Before we get into the science, I want to set the stage with a simple observation. You can train intensely. You can dial in your macronutrients. You can optimize your supplementation stack. But if you are missing this one before bed behavior, you are almost certainly leaving recovery, adaptation, and ultimately muscle growth on the table. And that behavior is deliberate pre-sleep light management. Here's what I mean. Most people associate muscle growth and strength development with what happens during their training sessions. The sets, the reps, the intensity, the progressive overload. While these are undeniably crucial components of stimulating muscular adaptations, they represent only the initiation of the process. The real transformation, cellular repair, hypertrophy, and the strengthening of neuromuscular connections occurs not during the workout itself, but as after the stimulus has been applied. More specifically, it occurs during rest, and more than any other state, it occurs during sleep. During sleep, the body enters a deeply anabolic state. This means the internal environment shifts toward recovery, tissue repair, and protein synthesis. One of the most vital hormones associated with this anabolic process is growth hormone, which is released in its highest concentrations during slow wave sleep, also known as deep sleep. This phase of sleep, characterized by slow, synchronized brain waves, is where the most profound physiological repair takes place. Muscle fibers that were broken down during exercise are rebuilt here, stronger and more resilient. Without sufficient time in this stage of sleep, the repair process is incomplete, which leads to suboptimal gains and an increased risk of overtraining or injury. But it's not just growth hormone at play. Sleep also helps regulate other hormones that are essential for recovery and muscle development, such as testosterone and IGF-1. These hormones just don't support muscle growth directly. They also help modulate mood, motivation, and the ability to train consistently over time. In contrast, inadequate sleep leads to elevated levels of cortisol, a catabolic hormone that breaks down tissue, inhibits protein synthesis, can significantly blunt the muscle building response to training. High cortisol also reduces testosterone levels, leading to a hormonal environment that is actively working against your goals. Furthermore, sleep is where the nervous system recovers. Training doesn't just stress the muscles, it stresses the central nervous system. The repeated neural firing that powers strength training, the coordinated motor unit recruitment, the neuromuscular efficiency, all of these are deeply fatigued by hard training. High quality sleep allows the CNS to reset, recharge, and recalibrate, which is necessary for maintaining strength output, motor control, and overall training intensity over time. Even the immune system, which is intimately tied to recovery, operates more efficiently during sleep. Microtears in muscle tissue are, to the body, minor injuries, and healing them requires immune activity. Sleep strengthens this process, while poor or fragmented sleep undermines it, slowing recovery and increasing inflammation. So while the training session is the stimulus, sleep is the response mechanism. If the stimulus is strong but the response is weak, the system doesn't adapt. You don't grow. You don't get stronger. You simply accumulate fatigue. Without adequate and high-quality sleep, you're working harder for a smaller return, and in some cases, even setting yourself back. Muscle recovery is not just a matter of calories, protein intake, or training frequency. At a fundamental level, it's a biological process governed by systems that are tightly regulated by external environmental cues. Among the most powerful of these cues is light, specifically how and when you're exposed to it. What many people fail to realize is that light exposure in the hours leading up to sleep has a direct, measurable effect on the body's ability to recover from training, making it one of the most overlooked tools in preserving and maximizing gains. Light isn't neutral, it's a biological signal. Photons hit the retina, a specific set of photoreceptors, particularly the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, send signals directly to a part of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. This structure governs circadian rhythms, which are 24-hour cycles that regulate sleep, wake timing, hormone release, body temperature, and even cellular repair. One of the main outputs of the SCN is the regulation of melatonin, a hormone produced by the pineal gland that facilitates sleep onset and supports the transition into deep, restorative sleep stages. In a well-regulated environment, melatonin levels begin to rise about 2 to 3 hours before your natural bedtime. This rise is one of the earliest steps in preparing your body for recovery. However, brief exposure to bright or blue, enriched light in the evening, such as that from overhead LEDs, smartphones, or televisions, can significantly suppress melatonin release. This suppression is not subtle. Studies have shown that evening light exposure can delay melatonin onset by over 90 minutes and reduce its overall production. This leads to delayed sleep onset, reduced sleep depth, decreased time spent in the phases of sleep that are most essential for muscle repair, When you short-circuit melatonin release through improper light hygiene, you're not just delaying sleep, you're compromising the biological processes tied to muscle regeneration. Growth hormone release, which occurs primarily during the early cycles of deep sleep, is diminished when sleep is delayed or fragmented. This impacts protein synthesis, muscle glycogen replenishment, and connective tissue recovery. Additionally, testosterone secretion, tightly coupled with sleep duration and quality, is also reduced. All of these hormonal shifts point toward a less favorable recovery environment, which over time can translate to stalled strength progress, impaired hypertrophy, and greater soreness between sessions. Moreover, light exposure before bed can elevate adrenal cortisol levels at a time when they should be at their lowest. Cortisol is a wake-promoting hormone that follows an inverse rhythm to melatonin. It should rise in the morning and fall at night. Artificial light at night disrupts this pattern, leading to elevated nighttime cortisol, which interferes with sleep depth and further tips the hormonal scale toward catabolism rather than anabolism. Elevated nighttime cortisol also impairs insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism, both of which are essential for post-training recovery and muscle glycogen storage. This makes it clear that the light you expose yourself to in the 102 hours before sleep isn't just affecting how easily you fall asleep, it's actively influencing how well your body recovers from the physical stress of training. At the center of the human body's biological timing system lies a small but critically important structure in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN. It's located in the hypothalamus, directly above the optic chiasm, which is why it's called supra, meaning above, chiasmatic. Despite its size, only about 20,000 neurons, the SCN acts as the master pacemaker of the circadian rhythm. It governs a vast range of physiological processes, including hormone secretion, sleep-wake timing, core body temperature fluctuations, feeding behavior, even the daily timing of gene expression across nearly every cell in the body. The key input for this clock is light. The SCN receives direct input from a specialized set of retinal cells called Auxillar's intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, IPRGCs. These cells are not involved in forming visual images. Instead, they're light sensors specifically tuned to the intensity and wavelength of light in the environment with a high sensitivity to short wavelength blue light around 4 to 80 nanometers. These IPRGCs project directly to the SCN via the retinohypothalamic tract. This pathway allows the brain to synchronize its internal circadian timing to the external light-dark cycle, what's called entrainment. When bright light, especially blue light, enters the eyes, particularly from overhead sources like the sun or artificial lighting, it activates the SCN and essentially sends a signal that it's daytime. This activates alertness, promoting pathways, and suppresses the production of melatonin, a hormone that promotes sleep and initiates the cascade of physiological processes necessary for nighttime repair and recovery. In the morning, this suppression of melatonin is appropriate. It helps raise cortisol levels, increase body temperature, and promote wakefulness. But in the evening, this same light signal becomes disruptive. Because the SCN governs so many downstream processes, incorrect signals at the wrong time of day, such as exposure to bright artificial light at night, can desynchronize the body's internal clocks. This not only delays the onset of melatonin, but also disrupts the timing of growth hormone pulses, impairs insulin sensitivity, and delays the body's transition into deep, restorative sleep. These disruptions are not just theoretical, they are measurable and impactful. Even a single night of circadian misalignment has been shown to reduce sleep quality, blunt testosterone secretion, impair glucose tolerance, all of which are critical variables in muscle recovery and growth. Importantly, the SCN does not function in isolation. It communicates with peripheral clocks located in tissues throughout the body, liver, muscle, adipose tissue, and even the skin. These peripheral clocks take their timing cues from the SCN, but also from behavioral factors like feeding times, physical activity, and temperature. When light exposure misaligns the SCN, it sets off a chain reaction that can desynchronize peripheral clocks as well, leading to a mismatch between when the body expects nutrients, when it repairs tissues, and when it ramps up anabolic hormone production. This internal misalignment compromises not only sleep, but also the body's ability to effectively adapt to training stimuli. Bright, blue, and rich light in the evening has a profound impact on the body's hormonal environment, and this effect is especially relevant for individuals who are training for muscle growth, strength, or physical recovery. The most immediate and well-documented consequence of evening light exposure is the suppression of melatonin, a hormone released by the pineal gland that plays a central role in initiating sleep and regulating the body's internal biological clock. Melatonin levels typically begin to rise 2 to 3 hours before a person's natural bedtime, creating the physiological conditions needed for sleep onset, deep sleep, and overall nighttime recovery. However, exposure to bright light, especially light in the blue wavelength spectrum, delays and suppresses this natural rise, leading to a cascade of negative effects on sleep quality and recovery related hormonal signaling. Even a relatively brief exposure to blue light in the evening, such as checking a smartphone, sitting under LED ceiling lights, or watching television, can delay melatonin production by over an hour. The delay in melatonin not only makes it harder to fall asleep, but also shifts the timing and architecture of sleep cycles. Deep sleep, or slow wave sleep, is typically concentrated in the first part of the night and is when the most critical recovery-related processes occur, including growth hormone release and muscle repair. When melatonin is delayed, so is deep sleep, which compresses or fragments the window of time when the body is most actively engaged in anabolic repair. Alongside melatonin suppression, evening light exposure also results into elevated cortisol levels at a time when cortisol should be at its lowest. Cortisol follows a diurnal rhythm, naturally rising in the early morning to promote wakefulness and gradually declining throughout the day to allow for relaxation and sleep at night. Artificial light, particularly overhead blue light, tricks the brain into thinking it's still daytime, disrupting this natural rhythm. This leads to an unnaturally high cortisol level at night, which interferes with sleep onset, reduces sleep depth, promotes a catabolic internal environment, one that is more inclined to break down a muscle tissue than build it. This hormonal interference has direct implications for recovery and physical performance. Elevated nighttime cortisol impairs the body's ability to efficiently shuttle nutrients into muscle cells, reduces the sensitivity of anabolic hormone receptors, and increases the likelihood of muscle protein breakdown. At the same time, low melatonin not only disrupts sleep quality, but also weakens immune function, increases inflammation, and impairs mitochondrial repair, all of which are essential processes during post-exercise recovery. The result is a systemic hormonal environment that is misaligned with the body's intended recovery cycle. In athletes or individuals engaged in consistent resistance training, combination of suppressed melatonin and elevated cortisol effectively blunts the adaptive response to training. Workouts become less productive over time, fatigue accumulates, and gains in muscle mass or strength plateau. These effects are not due to overtraining in the traditional sense, but rather due to chronic under-recovery driven by poor circadian hygiene. Sleep architecture is composed of multiple stages, each serving distinct physiological functions. Among these, deep sleep, also known as slow wave sleep or non-REM stage 3, is particularly critical for muscular recovery, tissue repair, release of key anabolic hormones. This stage of sleep is where the body initiates its most powerful restorative processes. However, poor light hygiene, particularly exposure to artificial light during the hours leading up to bedtime, significantly disrupts this architecture, resulting in less time spent in the deep sleep phase and a corresponding decline in the body's ability to build and repair muscle. Growth hormone, one of the primary drivers of tissue repair and muscle hypertrophy, is released in the largest quantities during the first sleep cycle, particularly during deep sleep. When sleep is shortened, delayed, common consequences of evening light exposure, this critical hormonal pulse is reduced in amplitude and frequency. This reduction has downstream consequences, including slower muscle repair, reduced collagen synthesis for tendons and ligaments, and impaired glycogen restoration in muscles. Over time, this leads to longer recovery periods between workouts, diminished training adaptations, increased susceptibility to overuse injuries. In addition to growth hormone, deep sleep also supports the synthesis and regulation of other anabolic hormones such as testosterone and insulin, like growth factor 1's IGF-1. Both of these hormones are central to protein synthesis and cellular repair. Testosterone, in particular, follows a circadian rhythm that peaks during sleep. Inadequate deep sleep, even by just 1 or 2 hours per night, has been shown to lower circulating testosterone levels the following day. This decrease becomes even more pronounced with consecutive nights of poor sleep, creating a compounding effect that directly undermines muscle building efforts. When individuals are exposed to artificial light before bed, especially light from screens, overhead LEDs, cool white bulbs, it suppresses the natural release of melatonin, delaying the onset of sleep and reducing its overall quality. Melatonin is not merely a sleep facilitator. It also plays a regulatory role in maintaining sleep structure. Without sufficient melatonin signaling, sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, and less efficient at guiding the body into and through the deep sleep cycles where hormonal recovery takes place. Even if total sleep time appears normal, quality of that sleep and the depth at which recovery occurs may be significantly diminished. Another consequence of disrupted deep sleep is the impaired clearance of metabolic waste products that accumulate in the brain and body during waking hours. This glymphatic clearance process is crucial for nervous system recovery and optimal brain function. In the context of training, reduced cognitive recovery affects coordination, focus, and motivation, all of which are essential for high-quality performance in subsequent workouts. Furthermore, poor sleep quality disrupts blood glucose regulation and insulin sensitivity, which are essential for nutrient partitioning and muscle glycogen replenishment. When sleep is shallow or fragmented, these processes become inefficient. The body's overall ability to enter a robust anabolic state is compromised. Managing light exposure in the 1 to 2 hours before sleep is one of the most impactful. Cost strategies for enhancing physical recovery and protecting the adaptations stimulated by training. This simple behavioral shift affects a wide range of physiological systems that are essential for optimizing sleep quality, hormonal balance, and muscular repair. During this pre-sleep window, the body is preparing to transition into its most anabolic state of the day, and the signals it receives during this period determine how effectively it makes that transition. Light is the dominant signal in this equation. The way it is managed has direct consequences on sleep latency, sleep depth, and the orchestration of recovery hormones. The circadian system is highly sensitive to environmental cues, light being the most powerful of them. In the absence of bright, blue-enriched light during the evening, the pineal gland begins releasing melatonin, signaling to the body that it is time to wind down. This natural rise in melatonin initiates a cascade of physiological changes. Body temperature begins to drop, cortisol levels continue to fall, and the nervous system shifts into a parasympathetic state. These conditions are not just favorable for sleep, they are required for deep, restorative sleep to occur. However, when the eyes are exposed to artificial light, particularly from screens, overhead LEDs, or televisions, this melatonin signal is weakened or delayed, which in turn delays the onset of sleep and reduces its restorative quality. Research shows that implementing even small changes to evening lighting can significantly improve sleep outcomes. Dimming indoor lights, using warm spectrum bulbs, limiting screen time, wearing blue light blocking glasses during the final 60 to 90 minutes before bed can all contribute to better sleep quality. These practices help preserve melatonin production, support earlier sleep onset, extend the time spent in slow wave sleep, the stage most responsible for growth hormone release, protein synthesis, and muscular repair. For athletes or anyone engaging in regular resistance training, this stage of sleep is where the majority of recovery and adaptation take place. Protecting it with light management becomes a direct method of protecting gains. Beyond hormonal effects, this pre-sleep light management strategy also stabilizes the autonomic nervous system. Exposure to artificial light in the evening increases sympathetic tone, the fight or flight arm of the nervous system, which elevates heart rate, increases alertness, disrupts the natural progression into the calm, parasympathetic state needed for sleep. In contrast, minimizing light exposure supports vagal tone, reduces nighttime heart rate variability, enhances the depth and continuity of sleep cycles. This allows the body to stay in each stage of sleep long enough to complete its necessary restorative processes. This protocol is followed consistently, reducing light input 1 to 2 hours before sleep. Circadian rhythms become more stable, sleep becomes more predictable and restorative, and hormonal cycles align more closely with the physical demands of training. This alignment ensures that the body is not only resting but actively rebuilding, reinforcing, and adapting in response to the day's efforts.